Even popes of the Roman Catholic Church have admitted that within the first 1,000 years of the church, the modern idea of the papacy just didn't exist.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Your Calvinist channel. And today I'm doing something a little bit different. I've invited my friend, Pastor Ben from Cleave to Antiquity, to do just a little short video on some important topics that often come up in the questions that you all send me. You guys know that every week I do a Q&A on Tuesday night, and often the Q&A will be from people who have questions about things like the papacy or things like the canon of scripture and stuff like that. And sometimes I like to bring on people who focus on those areas, especially those who are in the meat and the heat of the debates that are going on online right now. And Pastor Ben's one of those guys. He's been out there doing debates, having conversations with people, watching the trends that are happening. And so I invited him to come on today, and we're going to be talking about the subject of the papacy. So, Pastor Ben, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. This will be an interesting discussion because I feel like not a lot of people, especially if there's any Roman Catholics watching this, I feel like they haven't interacted with some of the counterpoints. Maybe they focused on the honorifics. Maybe they've read Matthew 16:18, and that's all it took for them. Or they've seen some Catholic Answers articles. So I'd like to present just a couple of counterpoints for people to consider and to chew on as they wade through maybe some of these claims that people in the Roman Catholic Church are making, especially online lately. Because I don't know if you've noticed, there's a big uptick in people having these types of conversations. So this will certainly be helpful. There was a debate very recently between Timothy Gordon and Jay Dyer, and they were discussing a couple of different topics, one being the filioque and another one being the papacy. But what I had noticed was when they were discussing the papacy, it didn't seem like Timothy Gordon had interacted with any of the serious counterpoints to this claim, because when Jay brought them up, it seemed like he was reading through them for the first time, such as some of the documents within Vatican I, which actually defines papal supremacy as the Roman Catholic Church holds today. And then also with the Chieti document, it didn't seem like he had interacted with that at all. So I'd like to go over some of that information today. But before we dive into that, I want to open up and read Matthew 16:18 here. So it seems to me when interacting with Roman Catholics, there is a bit of cognitive dissonance. I want to be fair to their position, but I'll also point this out, that whenever they find something that contradicts their worldview, even if it's within their own church's documents, they have a little bit of cognitive dissonance and they just circle back to, well, if Jesus gave Peter the keys and he's what the church is founded on, that's all I need. It doesn't matter if there's a contradiction in my view. I'm going to factory reset to what I heard about Matthew 16:18. So let me just read that really quick. So Matthew 16:18 says, "And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it." Shortly after he gives him the keys. Okay, well, if if that's what we're basing our kind of foundation of faith on, if you're a Roman Catholic, it seems like anytime there is a contradictory point brought forth, you factory reset to that. Well, it says the gates of Hades will never overcome it. So no matter if you defeat me in a logical argument or you show that my own documents contradict one another, none of that matters. The gates of Hades are not going to overcome the church. It doesn't matter as long as I'm in communion with the the descendant of Peter. You know what I mean? So I want to bring up a couple of counter arguments that I think will be helpful here. So if you don't mind, go ahead and share that document there on the screen, and I'll dive into it. So one of the more basic counter arguments here is the Chieti document. This was a East-West unity document. This is actually on the Vatican website, but I've copied and pasted it here. I like to keep all of my notes handy dandy in one Google Doc, so that's helpful for me. But I'll read to you what it says, and we'll talk about the pertinent pieces here. So over the centuries, a number of appeals were made to the Bishop of Rome, also from the East in disciplinary matters, such as the deposition of a bishop. An attempt was made at the Synod of Sardica, which was brought up in the debate, to establish rules for such a procedure. Sardica was received at the Council of Trullo. The canons of Sardica determined that a bishop who had been condemned could appeal to the Bishop of Rome, and that the latter, if he deemed it appropriate, might order a retrial to be conducted by the bishops in the province neighboring the bishop's own. Okay, so all of this to say, the Bishop of Rome operated as a court of appeals. If two bishops had a disagreement, they could make an appeal to the Bishop of Rome, and he could be the kind of tiebreaker there. But it says more than that. It also says appeals regarding disciplinary matters were also made to the See of Constantinople and to other sees. So it wasn't the only tiebreaker. Others kind of had this same level of authority there. Such appeals to major sees were always treated in a synodical way. appeals to the Bishop of Rome from the East expressed, and this is the important piece here, so pay attention, expressed the communion of the church, but the Bishop of Rome did not exercise canonical authority over the churches in the East. This is a concession by the Vatican that within the first 1,000 years of the church, the Bishop of Rome did not exercise authority over the churches in the East. And when it talks about canonical authority, it's talking about synods. It's talking about ecumenical councils. It's talking about the councils, the canons of the church. So the Bishop of Rome didn't exercise canonical authority over the churches in the East in the first millennium. That is a concession by the Roman Catholic Church of the reality of the first millennium's church ecclesiology. Now, some people will say, well, this isn't a magisterially binding document. This is a unity document. Well, it's on the Vatican's website, first off. Let me just put that out there. But this is parroted by popes of the Roman Catholic Church, even modern popes, who then Cardinal Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict, parroted this exact statement in his text, which I'll read to you here. This is from Principles of Catholic Theology in 1982. So this is just for context. This is a dialogue that he's talking about between somebody and Patriarch Athenagoras, who was the ecumenical patriarch in the Eastern Orthodox Church, and an exchange that was had in reference to, I guess, jurisdiction. So let's take a look at what is said here. So he says this in Principles of Catholic Theology on pages 198 and 199. He says, in other words, Rome must not require more from the East with respect to the doctrine of the primacy that had been formulated and was lived in the first millennium. Okay, so don't expect more from the East with respect to the doctrine of the primacy. Notice it doesn't say supremacy, but primacy. It's an honorific primacy that was given to the Bishop of Rome, as we saw with the Chieti document. That is not post-Vatican I papal supremacy, which we'll see in just a moment. So in other words, Rome must not require more from the East with respect to the doctrine of the primacy, which had been formulated and was lived in the first millennium, when the Patriarch Athenagoras, which this is just referring to the Eastern Orthodox Patriarch here, on July 25th, 1967, on the occasion of the Pope's visit to the Fanar, designated him as the successor of St. Peter as the most esteemed among us, as one who presides in charity. So he's giving him primacy honorifics, but not supreme honorifics. This great church leader was expressing the ecclesial content of the doctrine of the primacy as it was known in the first millennium. Rome must not ask for more. So he's admitting in his own documents here that Athenagoras actually expressed a first millennium reality, which was that the Pope did not have supreme jurisdiction over the churches in the East. So when the Eastern Orthodox patriarchs are interacting with the Pope or interacting with Roman Catholics, don't expect more from them, because their church is more focused on what the church was like in the first millennium versus what we have now, post-Vatican I, papal supremacy, supreme pontiff, universal bishop, all of this. It's basically an admission that this is an accreted belief. This is a later invention. So that's just two kind of counter arguments there that it seems like a lot of Roman Catholics have not interacted with. So I figured it might be helpful to come forth and just kind of present some of these documents so people can chew on this and show that even the Vatican, even popes of the Roman Catholic Church, have admitted that within the first 1,000 years of the church, the modern idea of the papacy just didn't exist.
Fellowship, faith, and a good cup of coffee. The gospel shines brightest when shared over stories, prayers, and a cup of our locally roasted coffee. Squirrely Joe's Coffee, brewing conversations that matter. Share his word, sip his grace. Visit squirrelyjoes.com and order coffee to the glory of God.
Okay, so hearing what you're saying, based upon what you've given us already, there has been a major change after Vatican I, and this would demonstrate that what was believed before is not what is believed today. So to say what they're saying is the position that's always been held would be incorrect, right? You're saying that after Vatican I, there were some major changes.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. This is from Vatican I. This is Pastor Aeternus. So this is an ecumenical council within the Roman Catholic Church. This is the dogmatic constitution of Pastor Eternus on the Church of Christ. If you read Canon 1 of this section here, Chapter 1 on the institution of the apostolic primacy and Blessed Peter. So you have some changes of language here. This is the document that really institutes papal supremacy as we know it today. So in any papacy debate, we have to be familiar with these types of documents. You have to be familiar with Vatican I. You have to be familiar with some of the common counter arguments, like the Chieti document, like some of the writings of Ratzinger. It seemed like, again, in that Jay versus Tim Gordon debate, he actually hadn't read some of the pertinent passages within Vatican I, because he actually asked to borrow the text from Jay mid-debate, which was not a good look. But we'll dive into this a little bit. So Chapter 1 on the institution of the apostolic primacy and Blessed Peter. We teach and declare that according to the gospel evidence, a primacy of jurisdiction over the whole church of God was immediately and directly promised to the blessed apostle Peter and conferred on him by Christ the Lord. Okay, so we can just break apart this piece right here. What did we just read? In the first millennium, the Bishop of Rome did not exercise canonical authority over the churches in the East. If Vatican I is true, then the Vatican should have never made that concession within its own documents. Ratzinger should have never made the concession that in the first millennium of the church, the Bishop of Rome did not have canonical jurisdiction over the churches in the East. He shouldn't have made those distinctions, those types of admissions there, because that actually breaks down the promises, the evidence that is put forth, and the declarations that are put forth within Vatican I in Pastor Eternus. Because if you notice, a primacy of jurisdiction over the entire church of God, the whole church, not just the West, but also the East, which is really easy for them to say. I don't know if you're familiar with like the Pentarchy and things like that. So Pentarchy, you have 5 patriarchates prior to the schism. It's not hard to be king of the castle when you're the only one left standing. So it's like one patriarch splits off from the other 4. Well, now I'm the only one left. That's just me in the West. Of course, I'm the supreme pontiff. Of course, I'm supreme. There's no other patriarchs for me to kind of, struggle against. So I don't know. I think honestly, if you were to study church history with an open mind, getting past the honorifics, which was the only thing that Tim Gordon had in that debate. I like Tim Gordon. I like his show, Rules for Retrogrades. I think it's entertaining. But in this particular topic, he was very outmatched. If you were to dive into church history, you will quickly realize, honorifics aside, the reality of the church in the first 1,000 years is not what you see today, this supreme jurisdiction over even the West, over the East, over the entirety of the church. You don't have this kind of like king of all Christians idea. It just doesn't exist. Even the papal minimalist position is kind of an innovation to push back on some of these ideas that are pretty evidently shown when you study church history with an open mind.
Awesome. Well, brother, I think that was super helpful for everyone who was watching. In fact, I want to now just appeal to the audience and say, do you like this format? Do you like these short videos, getting in, getting out, talking about something really important, giving you some information to chew on? If you do, definitely let me know in the comments. And don't forget to go over and check out Cleave to Antiquity. You can see Pastor Ben and all the things that he's doing over there, talking about Protestant apologetics, doing debates, reaching out, and trying to defend the faith. So again, thank you, Pastor Ben, for coming on the show today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you guys for watching. Again, remember, if you enjoyed this episode, hit the thumbs up button. And if you didn't, hit the thumbs down button twice. All right, guys, God bless you. And I'll see you next time.